Hi everyone, Armored Pants here, and I have another new video for you. This is the German line to Tier 4 DW2, or die Durchbruchswagen 2, as it would be known in German. Now this tank is available now with Battle Pass. As always, we will have a look at the tech spec. We will do that using blitzhanger.com. We'll have a full review including gameplay, etc. However, I think for this tank review, there's going to be basically two audiences, right? There's going to be people who have got this tank for the first time, never played it before, and there'll be a full review of the tank and show you its strengths, weaknesses, how to play it, etc. But also we'll take a trip down memory lane to, let's say, the players who are playing the game before update 5.5, where the DW2 is a significantly different tank, and we'll talk about that a little as well. Anyway, as the tank stands today, in terms of provisions, I would use a chocolate bar. It maxes out the tank's capabilities. I would also run gun rammer, supercharge and calibrated shells to maximize the performance of the gun system, and it does have a very good gun system indeed, especially for a tier 4 tank, because it has this Gun-Kw.K 40 75mm gun, which is basically more or less the same base gun system which is on tanks all the way up to tier 7, and it's a big gun for tier 4, right? 75mm, right? Gives you 103 millimeters of pen with AP, 139 with APC or, and 38 with HE. And load up some HE because you can use it on Electos and other lightly armored tanks, and you get maximum rolls over 200 damage points. 11-second reload, or 11.82 if you use calibrated shells. I would use gun rammer because it is a long reload for tier 4 and you have a lot of pen anyway. Damage points run 160 to 200 if you use HE, even more than that. And this is huge at tier 4. I mean, you also have a hit point pool of 620 or going up to 657 if you use improved assembly. I would use enhanced armor to get it up because you're going to want to bounce shots in this thing. But 620, I mean, that's as high and higher than some tier 5 tanks. It's a massive hit point pool as well, which is a great advantage with this tank. In terms of the gun system, muzzle velocity is 962 meters per second. Dispersion is 0.358. It's quite high. That's why I recommend using a refined gun to reduce that down. It's even higher if you don't use a refined gun. Using the formula for G index, which is basically muzzle velocity divided by dispersion squared, gives you a G index of 7.5K, which is pretty decent for tier 4. I mean, this is kind of tier 6-ish kind of gun index, which is really good. The tank also has 8 degrees of gun depression and 20 of elevation, so it has great gun alignment, really great gun alignment. And this is an important factor because when we look at the armor profile, you will see that this tank has really strong turret armor, and therefore you can use it for going hull down. It also does 35 kilometers per hour in a forward speed, 12 in reverse, but it has poor power to weight ratio, but it does have good traverse, so this tank is also a pretty impressive brawler. Now we're going to have a look at the armor profile in some detail. This tank is a heavy tank, and therefore it has heavy tank armor. If you look at the relative armor numbers here on the left, what does it tell you? Well, they're very high, obviously, but you can side scrape in this tank, and that's why this tank is significant. This tank is a brilliant tank for learning how to side scrape. If you are new to the game, if you haven't played heavies before and you want to side scrape, I mean, use this tank. It's brilliant for training, for learning those skills. It's brilliant for angling. It has all the characteristics of a heavy tank, particularly those later on in the higher tiers. But of course you're at tier 4, so it's a lot more forgiving. You can afford to make some mistakes. If you come out without the perfect angle for side scraping, you can still get bounces. So it's a great training tank for learning heavy tank skills such as side scraping. In fact, I was asked years ago when I just started making videos to do a video on side scraping, and I actually did it on the DW2, and I was up tiered in the game, and I think it was a really good example of how to side scrape and what side scraping is. It's called Side Scraping 101, and the video, I'll put a link for that video into the description of this video. It's an old video. It's not. I don't even think there's any commentary on it, but it just shows how effective the DW2 is at side scraping. And if you are new to the game, you've just gotten this tank. This is a brilliant training tank. It's brilliant for learning side scraping, but it's also brilliant for learning hold down, because it's 8 degrees of gun depression. You saw there it has strong turret armor, has a big gun mantlet, it will get bounces. And we're going to have a look at all of these aspects in action during the gameplay. But this tank really is very effective at executing, but most importantly learning those skills. And rather than learning those skills at tier 7, tier 8, tier 9, where it's much more difficult, much better players, much more experienced players, much better tanks that you're up against, it's a great training tank, and tier 4 is a great training ground. And I can't recommend enough that you use this tank to execute those key skills that will serve you very well as a heavy tank player later on. So this is effectively just a brilliant training tank for key skills: angling, hold down, and of course side scraping. And if you have some time, have a look at that 101 side scraping video. It's a short video, I think it's only a few minutes long, but it just shows side scraping in action and how effective the DW2 is. And this armor is just really excellent. I mean, if you look at the history of this tank, it was basically a prototype tank by Henschel & Son, which was developed in 38-39, and it was basically the origins for the VK3001, 3601, and ultimately the Tiger tank. So you're talking about a kind of more advanced heavy tank in tier 4. It's the origins of those tanks. And that actually kind of takes me into the history of this tank a bit in terms of the game. This is an iconic Blitz tank, right? For those of you who were playing the game before version 5.5, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those of you who are new to the game, let me explain to you a little bit. So, before version 5.5, tanks, lower tier tanks had a full provisions, etc., so they perform much better. So you can imagine this tank, which is a brilliant tank now, when it had much better power to weight ratio, had much better reload. This tank used to have a 7.1 second reload. Just imagine you're doing 200 plus alpha, and your average 175 alpha damage every 7 seconds in this thing. Drop adrenaline, it went down to 6 seconds. You could get bounces. A lot of the lower tier tanks can't pen this tank front on, and when you had full provisions, etc. Now it's a bit easier to pen, but this tank was just a monster at tier 4, and it was one of the favorite tanks of many players. And you also then found you had a lot of very experienced players playing this tank at tier 4, just to boost up their win rate. Because if you ran out in this tank in your top tier and you're an experienced player, you could more or less just run amok in it. And if you were 2 experienced players and ran a platoon of DW2s, I mean, you could basically play all day and maybe lose 1 game. This was just a phenomenal tank. Probably, I wouldn't say it was OP, but as close to OP as you could get without being OP. It was a tech tree tank as well, so everybody could get it. And if you knew what you're doing, had it fully kitted out, ran your full provisions, all your repair kits, etc., it was just a monster of a tank. Even now it's still pretty effective, but back then it was just something special. It has a kind of special place in my heart, because I think I've told you the story of my journey in Blitz before, right? I started playing Blitz, had no clue about the game. I just thought it was some standard shoot 'em up. Didn't know what I was doing, didn't understand how complex it was, and I was dreadful. And I think I'd played 1,000 games and my win rate was 38%. And as I said to you before, 30 of that percent was down to my teammates knowing what they were doing, because I hadn't a clue. I was toxic, I was awful. And then somebody said to me, well, look, just watch some videos. And I started watching Bushka. I think he was one of the first videos I ever watched, and learn the basic tactics and dynamics of the game, and also drop down, because I bought an IS-6. I was told it was the best tank in the game, and I just started playing at tier 8 with like maybe 80 games under my belt, so you can imagine that was a disaster, right? So I dropped down and I started playing tier 3, then tier 4, trying to you know, perfect the skills that I was watching in videos by, as I said, by the likes of Bushka, Martin Dogger, etc. You know, trying to see if I could do those skills. And I was playing this, the DeeDubya, and I was playing the Panzer 4D to learn how to play medium tanks and heavy tanks. And it worked for me, you know. I learned how to side scrape, learned how to angle, learned how to flank, how to play medium tanks in the Panzer 4D. And these tanks have a special place in my heart, you know, because they're very much part of my Blitz journey. The end of this gameplay, by the way, just to interrupt this history of the DeeDubya within Blitz and within my Blitz career, you're going to see exactly how good this turret armor is and how you can angle here. See, I'm angling up to the D2. He can't bend me. There's 50mm of armor on the front of this, and if you angle and do a little jig and wiggle as I did there, you're going to get a lot of bounces. And this is I think I get a steel wall and a Spartan medal in this, and I've got 10 hit points left. I get a lot of bounces in this game, and that's exactly what you can do in this tank. It's perfect for learning how to angle, perfect for side scraping, etc. And you can see here just game awareness here, you know, using the burnt out hull of the D2 and the building, and I'm just biding my time getting into a side scraping position here to angle out, and then I get the last kill. But you can see there just how effective the armor is in this tank. I took a lot of damage in that game, but you know, it seemed I was I went tip of the spear, I went front line, knowing that with that hit pool points I have, I can take some damage. I'm going to have a look at now another game which is a mastery game in it, and again demonstrating the key assets of this tank. But just to go back to the history, you know, the DeeDubya was was an iconic Blitz tank. It's no longer the tech tree. They took it out because they wanted to rebalance the game, and they also wanted to discourage experienced players from playing in tier 3, tier 4, whatever, where they are just you know, smashing the crap out of guys who are just learning how to play. And I guess in a way that's kind of fair enough, right? You can see here the Spartan badge, steel wall, and you can get these badges with this tank because it really is a very effective heavy tank. You know, it's a different tank now, right? So it's a very different tank than it was. It has an 11-second reload now instead of 7.1, right? You know, it's not as maneuverable because it doesn't have all the provisions anymore, etc. But nonetheless, it still is a very effective tank. What you should do with this tank is, particularly if you're top tier, is go front line. You have the armor, you have the gun for that. If you're new to the game, you only got this tank in the battle pass, etc. Use this tank to learn heavy tank skills. Also learn how to be aware of your teammates, unlike this guy here who drives me into the wall. Thanks very much, mate. But you know, this tank is very much a frontline tank. If you don't know how to side scrape, if you don't know what hold down is, watch some of the other videos on channel here where we teach you how to do those things, how to acquire those key skills. If you're up tiered in this tank, I mean, this tank used to be able to hold its own when it was up tiered before 5.5, right? I mean, I remember many occasions I even took out KV1s, etc. in this tank. Now it struggles a bit, mainly because it's not as maneuverable. It's been power creeped a bit that most tier 5 tanks now can pen it front on. And of course, with that long reload, you're at a serious disadvantage if you get into a brawl or face hug with a tier 5 heavy. You're going to probably lose. It doesn't matter who you are, because he just has more pen, more alpha, and he has much shorter reload and better armor. But you know, if you are up tiered, just be a bit more cautious, just support your own heavies. You know, but with 75mm gun, you can pen the opposition. You will need APCR. Even if you run calibrated shells, you're going to need APCR to pen a KV1, a T1 heavy, etc. front on. You're going to. So load up on some APCR as well. It's not going to be a problem for you. This tank has a huge magazine you can load. There's a huge amount of shells you can load. Now, in terms of skills, we're going to have a look here now at some kind of semi hold down. And what do I mean by that? Well, I'm not completely hold down. but it's semi-hull down in that I'm not just using the terrain, I'm also using the hulk of this burnt out DW2, my non-driving friend. And I'm using the gun depression, the 8 degrees of gun depression, to put my gun over the burnt out hulk of this tank and put in some shots onto the enemy while keeping safe. The DW2 here on the other team in cover is a good player. I'm going to tell you a little story about this in a second. He is a very good player and actually brings this game right down to the wire. But you can see here I am using the gun depression here, and I'm hull down using the hill and the hulk of this burnt out DW2 to put shots in while remaining in cover. I've cleared off now a couple of enemy tanks, and I haven't been taking any more damage myself. Now it's I'm going to get into kind of a duel with the DW2 here. And again, what you're going to see here, this sequence of gameplay, it's about understanding the tank that you're up against, right? Now this guy here in the Lago wants to, I don't know if he wants me to move or he's trying to get by me. That DW2 is just waiting for him to pop out, so that's why I'm saying negative. Don't go out there, you're just going to get smashed, right? Now I get a bounce and I bounce a shot, and now I move. Why? Well, I know that he has an 11-second reload. Even if he drops adrenaline, he still has a 10-second reload, so I can move up into this position, this more dominant position on this map. Try to put a shot in on the Lago over here. I snap one off, but it doesn't go through. And now I'm going to try to adopt a side scraping position here. It's going to be difficult, but I'm going to try to adopt one. I tried to put a shot into the top here of the DW2, but I messed that up a fluff it. But I'm in a more dominant position now. That's why I moved up. By the way, mines. Both of the games that you saw are on mines. If you haven't played Tier 4 for a while, and I guess some of you haven't, you've probably forgotten these maps. But you're going to be playing mines. You're going to be playing Fort Despair a lot. So just be aware of that. Now I'm in a kind of a duel with this DW2, but he is not expecting me to be side scraping here and covering my lower plate, and then I get a bounce from him, and I also get a free shot here into the Lago as well, and that's quite important. That shot there was quite important. You're going to see why later on as we run into the end game of this particular match. Now this DW2 here, this guy actually has featured before in my videos, and he's actually a very decent guy. He gets frustrated, so you see he rages a little bit on chat, but he's actually a really decent guy, and I always talk to him after games. He's really unfortunate, right? For whatever reason, the fates have us in games together, and I keep killing him regardless of what tier. So the last time he was running tier, he's a very experienced player, he's got over 35,000 games. He was running tier 9, tier 10 mediums, and I was doing video on the grill, and I think I met him 3, 4, maybe even 5 times over the space of one day. I killed him every single time, and I think I got like mastery badges in most of the games. And again, today I get a mastery badge in this game. And I was talking to him afterwards, and he was laughing about it. He was saying that he just keeps really getting unlucky, and he didn't recognize me, and that's one of the reasons why I keep changing my accounts and keep changing my in-game names, is so that I'm not recognized. Because he told me afterwards if he knew it was me, he would have not come after me like that. He just thought he was playing against some normal guy who was just running out to DW2 for the first time. But that's one of the reasons, another reason so I don't get targeted, because if I get recognized in the game, as with any YouTuber, people want to just target you, and you can't really play the game properly then. I went to the base there to draw the Lago out. It worked because I knew there was no point in me chasing. I wouldn't catch him, so that's why I did that. And then you can see we're running out of time here, and that's why that shot earlier where I took hit points off him was so important. Because we're running out of time, and if I hadn't taken some hit points off him, maybe perhaps we wouldn't have been able to clear him off and win that game. I think this was a good game in the DW2 because it shows, just how effective it can be. Those massive alpha rounds, the bounces you can get, going front line. This is the guy here, poor guy, but he's actually a decent guy. We always have a good laugh afterwards on chat in game. So, you know, I think it was a good overall illustration of the strengths of the DeeDubya. The big alpha rounds delivering almost 2k damage at tier 2, which is tier 4, which is really effective, really impressive. I mean, if you do tier 2k damage at tier 7, tier 8, you've had a decent game. You know, delivering a high caliber badge, top gun, bouncing shots, side scraping, going hold down as well, using that gun depression. All of the key aspects of this tank were demonstrated in that game. So I think it's a very good demonstration of what is still, despite all the nerfs, a very good tank. And also it's a good collectible tank. Even if you don't play the lower tiers too much, this is a keeper. You know, I would keep it. It really is an iconic Blitz tank. And as I said, it's a great training tank, and it's a gem of a tank if you're a new player, because you can't get it in the tech line. 75mm gun is really good, even with the 11-second reload. But just think, guys, when it was 7.1, just how good this tank was. Side scraping training vehicle, and have a look at that 101 side scraping video as well, and at the heavy tank guide to learn those skills, because they're key. I'll put a link for the heavy tank guide into the description as well. I would run chocolate and provisions, and then I would run the gun rammer, supercharge and refined gun to max out the gun handling and the performance of this tank. You know, it has high dispersions, therefore I would use refined gun, and I'd use gun rammer because 75mm of pen, 75mm gun gives you a lot of pen anyway, and the reload is quite long even with gun rammer. 8 degrees gun depression, therefore it's also good for practicing hold down with that third armor. So that's 2 key skills. Along with angling, that's three key skills you can learn in this tank. And if you're top tier, you can be a bully. You can go front line, and you know, some lower caliber guns can't even pen you front on. And as I said, this is an iconic Blitz tank, and even with some of its teeth pulled, this tank is still very effective. But it's an iconic Blitz tank with a special place in both my Blitz history and in Blitz history itself. It struggles a bit now if it's up tiered, as we discussed, so you'll need APCR. If you're up front, if you're front on against the KV1 or T1 heavy, the only way you can pen it, even if you're running calibrated shells, with APCR, so you need to load up some of those. But now that you can buy them with credits, it's not such a big deal. So cheers, Mush. Thanks for watching. I hope you found it enjoyable. I hope you found it useful. I hope you found a trip down memory lane, for those of you who are playing the game longer, enjoyable as well. So I guess now all that remains for me to say is, pants off.